Chapter 36, Another Brick in the Wall. Jon stood on the deck, gazing at the distant silhouette of Eastwatch. Just 3 days prior, they had said their goodbyes to the Stark brothers, setting them down on a beach just 10 miles from home. The brothers and their guards had expressed their gratitude for the shortened journey and the supplies they had received. They were satisfied with the deal they struck with Wyman, and Jon had watched with a sense of camaraderie as Daisy and Small Jon bid them farewell. Now, the towering presence of the wall loomed before him, its majesty filling him with a tingling sensation. The word ice echoed in his mind as he continued to stare at it. He felt a growing anticipation to see the wall up close, to reach out and touch something built by one of his ancestors. He glanced down at Ghost, who looked up at him with a longing expression, his eyes fixed on the wall. Jon reached down to pet his fur, and Ghost's tail wagged excitedly against the deck. "I know, boy. You're home too," Jon said. In response, Ghost sprang to his feet, ready to explore. As soon as the gangplank was lowered, Ghost bounded off the ship, eliciting yelps and startled screams from the people around them. Jon couldn't help but laugh. There was no danger as long as the townsfolk showed no threat to his wolf. He watched as Ghost raced past the small settlement, already clearing the area. Heading downstairs to prepare winter and honor, Jon found Loras looking eager to step onto solid ground. His friend had been suffering from a severe case of seasickness over the past few days. "You should go down to the dock, Loras," Jon suggested. I know. But I have things to do," Loras replied, his voice strained. "Just go. I'll handle it." "You need to get your feet on dry land," Jon insisted. Loras nodded appreciatively, finally ready to heed his friend's advice. It took Jon only a few minutes to gather Loras's belongings and bring them to the deck. His own gear he carried down to the ship's stables. He marveled at how they had managed to fit so many horses and their equipment on the vessel. Somehow, they had made it work. After tying his chests to the cart, he readied the horses before leading them off the ship, where Jaime was speaking with some of the Black brothers. "We have some supplies for the commander here, but we won't be staying. We intend to set out for Castle Black immediately," Jaime said to a short, gruff man. "I thank you, my lord. We always welcome supplies, and the men will be pleased with the ale," the man replied, a grim smile spreading across his face. "You and your men are more than welcome." "The first 2 carts are yours," Jaime said. The man and his companions exchanged glances between Jaime and the carts, their smiles growing wider. "May the old gods bless you, my lord," the man said as he moved toward the carts. Jon watched as the rest of the carts were loaded. It would take a few more hours before they were ready to leave, and they had broken their fast early that morning to prepare. They would need over a week to reach Castle Black, assuming nothing went wrong, and everyone was eager to be on their way. Leading Honor over to Jaime, Jon smiled when he saw Daisy glance at her lord. The two had certainly grown closer since their dance in White Harbor. "My lord," Jon said, handing Jaime the reins. "Have you seen Loras, Jon?" Jaime asked. I sent him off the ship when we landed." "He needed to stand on firm ground," Jon replied, earning a laugh from Jaime. "That he did. Come, let's see if we can find him. I'm eager to ride Honor anyway." Jaime mounted his horse, and Jon followed suit. It didn't take long for them to find Loras. He was leaning over a small well, draining the contents of a mug. His color had returned, and he looked far happier. "How are you feeling?" Jon asked. "How are you feeling, lad?" Jaime asked, turning to Loras, who quickly spun around. "Good, my lord." "Eager to ride," Loras replied. "Then come on. I want to put Honor through his paces while we wait for the others." "Very good, my lord." Loras tightened his new cloak and hurried off to find his horse. "You up for a race, Jon?" Jaime challenged, a playful note in his voice. "You think you can beat me, my lord?" Jon smirked. I do. Come on, let's head out. I see how it is. A private race, can't have the Lord beaten in public, can we? Jon teased. Come here, you cheeky sod. Jaime reached out to give him a playful slap, laughter in his voice. See? Even right beside you, and you can't catch me. You've got no chance, my lord, Jon said as he and Winter slowly rode ahead. By the time they reached the outskirts of the small settlement, they found Loras had company. Small Jon was atop a larger brown destrier he'd bought in White Harbor, while Daisy and her sister rode smaller palfreys. Both of the Reeds were mounted on garrons. Lady Lynesse had opted for a small covered cart, the closest thing they had to a wheelhouse. It was laid out comfortably, so instead of riding, she stood beside Ser Jorah and his courser. The guards had chosen a variety of mounts, most opting for either palfreys or coursers. Lord Jaime has challenged me to a race, Jon announced, his voice ringing out, and Jaime smirked, shaking his head. 50 coppers on Jon, Jorah called out, and Jaime shot him a mock look of outrage. I'll second that, Allers added, causing a few laughs to ripple through the group. Jon noticed Jaime perk up when Daisy placed her coin on him instead of Jon. In the end, the betting was fairly even. Those who had seen Jon ride Winter before placed their bets on him, while those who hadn't backed Jaime. The route of the race was simple. About half a mile ahead, there was a small group of trees. They would race to it and back. As they readied themselves, Lyra Mormont stepped forward to give the order to begin. At my signal, Lord Jaime, Snow, are you both ready? Aye, they replied in unison. All right, go, she shouted. Jon kicked Winter into gear immediately, quickly gaining a lead. Jaime kept pace beside him, his mare moving swiftly but not yet at full speed. The cold air hit Jon's face, igniting a fire within him rather than cooling him down. He closed his eyes, letting the wind rush past, his hair blowing back behind him. When he opened his eyes, he was approaching the turn and noticed Jaime lagging behind. He made the turn and was already heading back before Jaime even reached it. Riding hard, he raced down the path, catching sight of the group ahead. He noticed Ser Jorah looking at him strangely, and he could hear the cheers around him when suddenly, shouts of warning and screams of terror erupted. Before he had a chance to react, he caught a glimpse of a white blur out of the corner of his eye. As he rode on and looked back, shock washed over him. There was a large brown bear being devoured by Ghost. In that moment, the reality hit him. Ghost had just saved his life. Jaime, watching Jon ride Winter, felt like he was witnessing Arthur wielding his sword. It was sheer beauty, something so right and natural that it made him question his own efforts. He kept up with Jon for less than a quarter of the distance before Jon began to pull away. Jaime knew he was an excellent horseman, but compared to Jon, he felt as far behind as he would against Arthur with a sword in hand. When he turned to see his king riding so far ahead, pride surged within him. He kicked his horse, Honor, trying to find something extra, and she responded, though he knew it wouldn't be enough to win. But as he sped up, a terrifying sight met his eyes. The bear was enormous and heading straight for him. Jon was too far away, and the others were too distant to help. No matter how fast he rode, the bear would reach him before anyone else could intervene. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Ghost appeared. The wolf wasn't just quicker than the others, he was in a league of his own. The collision was astonishing. The bear was thrown more than 15 feet, unable to regain its footing before Ghost was upon it. Jon had never witnessed anything like it. Within seconds, the bear lay motionless, and Ghost rushed over to him. When Ghost reached Jon and the others, Jon felt a wave of relief wash over him. His king was unharmed, though clearly a bit shaken. Ghost approached Jon, and the boy wrapped his arms around the wolf in a tight hug. Dismounting, Jon walked over, laughing as Ghost licked his face. Jorah sent guards to drag the bear's carcass away. Are you all right? Jorah asked. I'm fine, my lord, thanks to Ghost. Aren't I, boy? Jon replied, and Ghost licked him again. I didn't think there'd be bears here, Jaime said, glancing at the northerners. They're around, my lord. More in other areas, it's true, but they do exist. I just haven't seen one attack like that before, Yora explained. Looking at the others, he noticed they shared his concern. Daisy shot him a worried look, and he responded with what he hoped was a reassuring smile. When she rolled her eyes at him, he smirked, satisfied that it had worked. Loras, holding Winter, looked pale, so Jon walked over and patted the boy on the shoulder, pleased when Loras nodded in response. Among the group, a few expressions stood out to him. The young Reed lad gazed at Ghost with a mix of intrigue and relief, while Small Jon wore a battle-worn look, as if he had witnessed something that shook him to his core. Jon remembered seeing that look before, like the time on Pike when the battlements collapsed, crushing some of the castle's defenders. It wasn't exactly fear, but it was certainly rooted in it. Small Jon looked like a man who had just had his worst fears confirmed. He signaled for the group to head back to the small town, knowing they would need to be extra cautious on their travels. Thankfully, he felt confident that Ghost would alert them to any danger. It took only an hour or two to prepare for their departure. They had gifted the bear to the Night's Watch, and Ghost seemed uninterested in the animal once it was killed. The man he had met earlier was overjoyed by the gift. The meat and pelt would be invaluable, and it seemed he had made a friend for life. As they began to ride out of the town, Small Jon felt a sense of happiness seeing Jon, Loras, the Reed children, and Daisy's sisters riding together, laughing and joking. He rode alongside Yora, who occasionally glanced back at Jon, causing Small Jon some concern. Before long, Daisy rode up to join him, her hair tied back, a sight that disappointed him. "My lord," she said, smiling as she reached him. "My lady," he replied with exaggerated seriousness, making her laugh. "While I appreciate the excitement, I could have done without seeing that damn bear today," she admitted. Me too. Thank the gods for Ghost. I've never seen anything like that before," she continued. "Even in the north, we know about dire wolves, but I hadn't seen one until Ghost. To see him with the bear," she shuddered. "Well, thankfully, he's on our side," Jaime chimed in. He and Jon have a bond, don't they?" Daisy remarked. "They do," Jaime replied, pleased to see a small smile spread across her face when he said her name. "And I'm glad he's on our side." "Have you been to Castle Black before?" she asked. "What? No, never. I've only met my uncle a couple of times. I'm looking forward to it." Jaime sat quietly for a moment, trying to figure out how to ask the question he had in mind. He and Daisy had. Jaime had kissed Daisy more than once since they danced together, and he knew they both wished to take things further. Yet, he meant what he had told Jon, he wouldn't dishonor her. This left him with only one option, but he had something important to share with her before that could be addressed. "Daisy, there's something I need to tell you," Jaime said, noticing how she tightened her grip on the reins. "You can tell me anything, Jaime." "Can I?" "Would you swear it before a heart tree that what I tell you stays between us? Could you swear it in front of your gods?" Jaime asked, his eyes filled with both hope and worry. "What is it, Jaime?" "I can't, Daisy. I can't unless you swear it." "I'm sorry." He watched her as she considered his words, and then she nodded. "There's a heart tree at Castle Black, beyond the wall. My uncle told us a story about how he swore his oath there when he joined." "We can go, and I'll swear it," Daisy replied, and Jaime felt a wave of relief wash over him. "After that, there's a question I'd like to ask you, my lady." "One I've wanted to ask for a long time," Jaime said, smiling broadly. Who knows? Maybe I'll even answer your question too," she laughed, turning her horse around to ride back to her sisters. Jaime couldn't help but laugh as he watched her ride off. He hoped she wouldn't be angry when she learned the truth, that she would accept it and embrace it like he had. But mostly, he hoped that once he was done, she would say yes. The ride to Castle Black was interesting, and as he spotted the gates in the distance, he looked forward to sleeping in a room with a roof over his head. The tents they had stayed in were comfortable enough, but the noise of the wind against them was disturbing. He and Jon had managed to spend an hour or two each day going over the basics of their mission. As they journeyed, Jon's friend watched with a mix of awe and concern during their practice sessions. Initially, Jon struggled to warg successfully, despite the undeniable bond he shared with Ghost. It was a connection unlike anything he had ever experienced. The moment Jon witnessed Ghost attack a bear, he was left in shock. He hadn't warged with him and hadn't even realized the bear posed a threat. This weighed heavily on Jojen, who felt guilty for not warning Jon. As soon as he had the chance, Jojen apologized. "I'm sorry, Jon. It was my fault." "What was?" Jon asked, puzzled. "The bear," Jojen explained, his voice filled with regret. "I felt it in the back of my mind, so I tried to reach out to it. I think I startled it, and it ran away. I didn't mean to, I swear it." "Jojen, it was an accident," Jon reassured him, chuckling. "In the end, it all worked out, didn't it? The Night's Watch got a bear out of it, after all." From that moment on, they practiced whenever they could, but Jon often grew frustrated by his slow progress. It took 2 full days before he finally managed to warg intentionally. When a mouse scurried up to him, even Loras couldn't help but laugh. "How did that happen?" Jon asked, bewildered. "I don't know." "What did you do differently?" Jojen inquired. "I just felt it in my head, like I was knocking on a door. I asked to enter instead of forcing my way in, I think," Jon replied, rubbing his temples. "That's it. You can force your way in, but it's harder, and the animal resists. If you ask, if you suggest, then they can choose to let you in," Jojen explained excitedly. Over the next few days, it became clear to Jojen that Jon's warging abilities far surpassed his own. He understood that the blood of the First Men was strong, and while his own family had magical talents, the Starks were legendary. But what Jon could do was something else entirely. He easily warged into rabbits, deer, and elk, but with birds, it became even more evident. He had witnessed men warg into ravens and eagles, mastering the art of flight in a way that left Jojen in awe. "Look at the raven, Jon," Jojen said, pointing to the sky. "Can he actually do that?" "I mean, just look how high it is," Loras chimed in, skepticism lacing his tone. "I think he can," Jojen replied. To everyone's amazement, Jon didn't just warg into one raven, he managed to connect with 5 more nearby. As he watched all 6 ravens land and walk toward him, a shiver ran down his spine. 1,000 eyes in one, he thought, the memory of the rhyme surfacing in his mind. A few minutes later, Jon opened his eyes, and the ravens took flight. But horror washed over him as blood trickled from his nose, and he collapsed. He regained consciousness a short while later, but for the rest of the day, he complained about a terrible ache in his head. Thankfully, it faded by the next morning. It was on the second-to-last day of their journey that Jon decided to try warging into Ghost and discuss the dreams he'd been having. "When you dream, Jojen, does it feel real?" Jon asked, curiosity etched on his face. Sometimes it does. It depends on what I'm seeing. Some dreams feel just like dreams, but others, it feels like I'm actually there," Jojen replied, nodding thoughtfully. "I see things, Jojen, my family. I see them as if they're right here with me. My brother, my sister. I've experienced that too. I've seen Mira go on a hunt or watched my father pray by the tree." Jon looked at him oddly and nodded but chose not to elaborate further. Just then, Ghost came into view, prompting Jon to shift the conversation. "Let's try warging into him instead," Jon suggested. Jojen nodded and settled back. Jon barely closed his eyes before he felt himself slip into ghost. The wolf approached and licked his face, and Jon opened his eyes, returning to his own body. "Did you knock at the door again?" Jojen asked, impressed by how quickly Jon had warged. "No, the door was open, waiting for me," Jon said, a broad smile spreading across his face. He attempted to bring up the dreams again, but when he mentioned discussing it after reaching Castle Black, Jojen felt a twinge of disappointment. Still, he remained hopeful. Better than he had in a long time. Having someone who understood what he was going through brought Jon immense relief. When he shared his feelings, he felt a genuine kinship with Jojen. Mira noticed the change in his demeanor, remarking that he seemed happier. And he was. The dream that had haunted him most had shifted. Instead of dread, he now felt a sense of hope. At Castle Black, in the year 293 AC, Ben-Jen stood on the wall, gazing south. The duties of a first ranger didn't typically involve waiting for a procession, but ever since the Raven had arrived from Eastwatch, he had been counting the days. Now, as he spotted the figures in the distance, he hurried down from the wall. The lift felt excruciatingly slow, and by the time he reached the ground, the Lord Commander was already there, waiting for him. "I take it they're here then, Ben-Jen?" the Lord Commander asked. "Aye, my Lord Commander. You must be as eager as I am to see family again." "Indeed. Is it a large supply, Ben-Jen?" "It seems to be. There were an awful lot of carts." "Well, even without the family reunion, that alone would be reason to celebrate," Gior replied with a smile. When the gates opened, a white blur dashed toward him, almost as welcome as the sound of his nephew's voice chasing after it on horseback. "Ghost, come back," Jon called, as the wolf bounded up to him, licking his hands and face, much to the amusement of his brothers. "It seems Benjen's friend remembers him," one of his brothers shouted, eliciting laughter from the others. "Uncle." Jon's voice rang out as he jumped from his horse and ran to him. "Jon, it's good to see you, lad," Ben-Jen said, wrapping him in a warm embrace. "I missed you, uncle. I missed you so much." "I missed you too, lad." Ben-Jen took a moment to observe his nephew. Jon had grown taller, his hair now shoulder-length and darker than he remembered. His gray eyes appeared almost black in the fading light, and he had filled out significantly. Jon could see that Ben-Jen was clearly working hard in the sparring ring, which wasn't surprising given his recent exploits in Lannisport and King's Landing. But there was something else about him, something that made the boy seem different from the one Jon remembered. "Come on, let's meet the rest of your party. We'll have plenty of time to talk later," Ben-Jen said. Jon nodded in agreement, and they walked over to where Gior was greeting his family. He watched as Gior embraced his son, struggling to find the right words to say to his daughter. Jon then introduced Ben-Jen to Jaime Lannister, along with a young brown-haired boy and 2 children who must have come from the Neck. "My lord, this is my uncle Ben-Jen," Jon said. Ben-Jen could hear the affection in his nephew's voice. "Ben-Jen, this is Lord Jaime Lannister," he added. Ben-Jen straightened, trying to maintain a formal demeanor. "On behalf of myself and my family, I want to thank you for looking after my nephew." Jaime smiled at Jon. "There's no need to thank me, my lord. I've been more than fortunate to have Jon as my squire. It's just Ben-Jen, my lord." "No lords in the watch except the Lord Commander," he said, his tone softening. "Then it's good to meet you, Ben-Jen. Jon's been looking forward to seeing you for a long time." "I appreciate that, my lord," Ben-Jen replied, returning the smile. "Uncle, this is Loras, Lord Loras Tyrell, my best friend." Jon smirked as Loras stiffened at being addressed as a lord, but then he relaxed and smiled at being called a friend. "It's a pleasure to meet you, my lord." "Any friend of Jon's is a friend of all the Starks," Ben-Jen said, noticing Jon shudder slightly. "What was that about?" He made a mental note to speak with his nephew later as Jon introduced him to both of the Reed children. Ben-Jen was surprised Howland had allowed his children to visit Jon, but then again, most of Howland's decisions surprised him. Before they could talk further, Jeor approached, looking at Jaime Lannister with a different expression. Jon noticed a change in his uncle Ben-Jen. He had been courteous before, but now he seemed almost friendly. "My lord, I want to thank you again for these supplies. I've never received a gift like this in many years," the old bear finally managed to say. "Think nothing of it. When Jon asked me to bring him here, he explained the good and important work you men do. He convinced me we needed to do more to help, so consider this the first shipment." "There will be more each year," Jaime replied. Then Jen noticed Jon nodding at him, a look of approval on his face. "My lord, I can't thank you enough," Jeor said, turning to Jon. "You, lad, what you've done here for the North and my family. The North isn't the only one who remembers. The Watchers on the Wall won't forget either." Ben-Jen looked on with pride as his nephew accepted the praise, dismissing it and insisting it was Lord Jaime who deserved the thanks. Ben-Jen couldn't help but smile at that. When they reviewed the contents of the carts, Ben-Jen was amazed. Dried food, flour, good steel swords, armor far better than their own, furs, and cloth. The ale would surely bring the most cheer to the lads, but to think that his nephew was partly responsible for such a boon was heartening. "Come, Jon, let's show you to your room so we can talk some more." "Can we go on top of the wall, uncle?" Jon asked eagerly. "Aye, but don't you want to settle in first?" "Aye, we'll do that and then go on top. Is that all right?" Ben-Jen nodded and noticed Jaime Lannister glance at Jon. Jon smiled back and nodded, and Jaime did the same in return. Ben-Jen found it odd how they seemed to communicate without words. Was their relationship that strong? Did Jaime care that much about his nephew? He would need to talk to Jon about a few things as he watched him remove a large chest from a cart and carry it inside. It didn't take long for Jon to settle in. He was sharing a room with his friend and the Reed boy, which didn't seem to bother him at all. As they headed to the lift, Jon spotted Maester Aemon on the walkway above, making his way to the rookery. If it had been another brother, Jon would have waved and greeted him, but there was no point with the blind Maester. Still, if Aemon wanted to greet him, his blindness would pose no obstacle. "Is that Maester Aemon?" Jon asked softly, glancing at the black-robed figure. "Aye, it is. How did you know the Maester was called Aemon?" Ben-Jen replied. "I just did," Jon said cryptically. For a brief moment, Ben-Jen thought he saw a glimmer in his nephew's eyes, making them look more indigo than gray. The trip to the top of the wall was taken in silence, which surprised Ben-Jen. He had expected Jon to be full of questions. When they finally reached the top, he reminded Jon to be careful, and they walked to the edge to peer over. Jon steadied himself, took a deep breath, and looked out beyond the wall. Ben-Jen felt the air around them grow charged, as if it had stilled. "There's something I need to tell you, uncle, about my mother," Jon said. Ben-Jen's thoughts flickered to Jaime. He had always known that the Night's Watch was in a dire state. He had seen the dregs that the recruiters brought back from King's Landing, but standing in Castle Black and witnessing it firsthand really drove it home. So when the Lord Commander began to thank him, Jaime immediately shifted the credit to Jon. Had it not been for Jon, he would never have come here, never helped. Jon was the one who truly deserved their praise. The amount of coin it had cost to bring the supplies was negligible compared to the benefits Jon had brought them. After all, he had family here too. If Jaime could help them by spending coin, then it was a small price to pay. Ben-Jen watched as Jon smiled and nodded at him as he left with his uncle, hoping the man would take the news well. Given the warm reception he received upon arrival, it was clear that Jon's uncle cared deeply for him. Jaime noticed a man watching him with a grim expression. When their eyes met, the man muttered something before walking away. Jaime knew there were loyalists among them, remnants of the rebellion, and he expected to encounter more as time went on. As the last of the carts rolled in, Jaime approached his men and the Black Brother directing the operation. He took a moment to speak with Arlen. Arlen. My lord? While we're here, I want either you or Pharaoh with me at all times. Split your sleep schedule accordingly. You know which other guards to choose. Also, speak to Jors and Allers to ensure they do the same for Jon. Of course, my lord. How's it going here? Good, my lord. The Black Brothers seem pleased with the supplies. Some of the men are helping them move everything, and they've assured me the carts will get back to Eastwatch for the next delivery. Very good. See to the men's rooms, will you? Pharaoh, you're with me. Jaime nodded to the other man, who fell in step behind him alongside another guard. He watched as Yora, Lynesse, Daisy, and her sisters walked with the Lord Commander toward what must be his quarters. Shortly after, a small man approached Jaime to direct him to his own room. Upon arrival, he was relieved to find that Loras and Jon's room was almost directly opposite his. With them so close, he could ensure their safety. The room itself was modest, furnished with a bed and some worn pieces, but he was grateful for the large fireplace, which he intended to make good use of. Just as he settled in, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find Loras standing there. Settled in all right? Aye, my lord. I put the horses away when Jon went with his uncle. Good lad. Is he going to tell him? I think so. Is his chest safe? Jaime asked, how are things in your room? Aye, my lord. Jojen and Mira are inside, and their guards, along with my own, are outside, came the reply. It's not exactly comfortable, is it? Jaime joked. No, my lord, but it's better than a tent in the cold, Loras said, sharing a laugh with him. Well, come on then. Let's take a look around this place. They were soon joined by Jojen and Mira, and together they began to explore the home of the Night's Watch. To say it was ramshackle would be generous, it was in terrible condition. The wood was rotting, and the doors and windows barely kept the wind at bay. They had been placed in the king's tower, and Jaime couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of Jon being the first king to visit in over 100 years. The other towers were in an even worse state and, aside from the guard's tower, seemed unfit for purpose. The walkways looked barely capable of holding their weight, and the buildings appeared to be on the verge of collapse. He spotted the maester standing on a walkway that likely led to the rookery and his quarters. As they made their way down to the yard, Jaime surveyed the immense amount of work it would take to bring the place up to any sort of standard. He resolved to speak with Jon later, perhaps they could do more to improve it. In the yard, the scowling, grim-faced man from earlier was berating two young lads who were struggling to spar. Despite their lack of skill, it was the man's training methods that frustrated both Jaime and Loras. No one would learn anything under this man other than how to swing a sword in anger. There was no technique, no rhythm, just a crude hack and slash. Jaime shook his head and continued walking. It really is a mess, Mira said softly. Aye, it is, my lady. We'll have to do our best to make it better, won't we? Jaime replied, smiling as they were joined by Daisy and her sisters. What are you so happy about? Daisy asked, a smirk on her face. Me? Happy? Perish the thought. Lady Mira was just commenting on how rundown this place is. My uncle's done his best, it's not his fault that no one sends the maid, Lyra defended the old bear. You misunderstand me, my lady. I wasn't commenting on your uncle's work, but rather on the shortcomings of the rest of us, Jaime replied. You men from the south really do use far too many words, Jory said, shaking her head. My apologies, my lady. It's a force of habit, but this place is a shithole, and we must do better, Jaime admitted, prompting laughter from all four ladies. See? We'll make a northerner out of you yet, Daisy teased, looking at him. I am yours to command, my lady, Jaime said with a bow, which earned him a playful slap on the head and more laughter from the ladies. "I saw that, Loras," Jaime said, glancing at his squire, who was struggling to contain his laughter. "I couldn't help it, my lord. If you moved that slowly in the yard, maybe I'd be able to get a hit in too," Loras replied with a grin. "What's that you say, boy?" a voice called from behind them. Loras and Jaime turned to see a grim-faced man sneering at them as he approached, now wearing a smug and more sadistic grin. "Nothing, sir," Loras said quickly. "Oh, I thought you were discussing the Kingslayer's prowess. Though I've heard you need to turn your back to see his true worth," the man taunted. Jaime reached out a hand to stop Loras, who looked ready to attack. He noticed that Daisy appeared equally prepared, as did her sisters. Shaking his head at them, he smiled at the man and began to walk away. "See? Just as I said, far too craven to face a man head-on," the man jeered. "You think so, sir? Then grab a sword, and we'll see if you can back up your words," Jaime challenged, his anger evident. "I wouldn't dare soil my blade on the likes of you, Kingslayer," the man replied before walking away. Jaime said nothing, merely smiling to himself as he headed back toward his room. He hadn't made it halfway when Daisy joined him. Thankfully, she remained silent as they walked together. Jon and his uncle still hadn't returned, and Jaime felt a sense of relief. While he might have managed to stop Loras, he knew he wouldn't have been able to hold back Jon. As he walked, a sudden commotion broke the air, followed by a loud scream. He and Daisy exchanged worried glances and turned back, sprinting towards Loras and the girls. When they arrived, they found the group doubled over with laughter. Jaime couldn't help but chuckle too when he saw what was causing their amusement. There, about 20 yards away, lay the man who had insulted him earlier, sprawled in a puddle of his own making. Guarding him was Ghost, Jon's white wolf, teeth bared and paws firmly planted on the man's chest, ensuring that no one dared approach. For a moment, Jaime worried about how they would manage to remove Ghost from the scene. Just then, the wolf took off, racing towards the lift where Jon and his uncle were stepping out as it came to a stop. "I want that beast's hide, I tell you," the grim man shouted, but his words fell on deaf ears. "Enough, Thorn. My office, now. And you, lad, take care of your damn wolf," Gior commanded from a walkway above them. "I will, Lord Commander," Jon replied, making his way over, his uncle still looking a bit shell-shocked. When Jon reached Jaime, he shot him a smug smile that made Jaime laugh out loud, prompting the others to join in. When he and Loras had first told Jon about his lessons in warging, Jaime hadn't believed them. But witnessing it firsthand left him speechless. This was a whole new side of Jon's abilities, and he knew he needed to talk to him about it later. After bidding his farewells, Jaime headed back to his room, Daisy walking alongside him. Once inside, and with the door closed, she immediately grabbed him and kissed him. They stumbled back to the bed, their kisses growing more passionate. Jaime felt himself growing excited as his hands found their way lower down her back. Before he knew it, he was caressing her, and her soft moans encouraged him further as she began to move on top of him. Left her in no doubt that she was just as excited as he was. It was only when she started to remove her clothes that he stopped her. "We can't," he said, shaking his head. "We can," she replied, kissing him once more. "I won't dishonor you." "It's not dishonor if it's what I want too. Daisy, I want you. Do you think I don't want this more than anything? Then take it, Jaime." "Take me," she said, leaning in to kiss his neck. "I can't, not like this, not here. Please, Daisy, it means more than this." "You mean more." "Fine, I'll wait," she said, pouting. He couldn't help but smirk, which earned him another playful slap on the head. He reached up, pulling her close. As she settled in beside him, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt complete. With Cersei, it was always just about sex. Once it was done, he had no desire to linger in her company. In fact, without the physical connection, he found he actually disliked being around her. But with Daisy, it was different. He genuinely liked her as a person, as a woman. He enjoyed spending time with her, talking with her, and he was sure he would even enjoy sparring with her. They had done little more than kiss, yet each moment together left him feeling more fulfilled and happier than he had ever felt before. Sure, he felt a bit frustrated that they hadn't gone further, but he wanted to wait. She needed to know the truth, the full truth. And then, if she wanted to, if she agreed to it, he would marry her whenever she wished. "What are you thinking about in that pretty little head of yours?" she asked. "The future. Just the future. Speaking of which, I spoke to my uncle. He'll allow us to go out beyond the wall tomorrow. He says we'll need to bring some of the brothers with us, but the weirwood is only a couple of miles from here. That is, if you still want to talk." "I do, more than anything," he said, as he. Jon kissed her softly, lost in thought. The wall was majestic from the ground, but standing atop it, he felt a sense of awe that far surpassed its beauty. Below him, the world stretched endlessly, and as he gazed into the lands beyond, he felt small and insignificant. The world out there had existed for centuries, indifferent to thrones and notions of justice. It cared little for who was right or wrong, survival was all that mattered. He found himself contemplating the people who endured those harsh conditions, wildlings, savages, but were they truly savages? Or were they just people, much like him and his uncle, doing their best to survive? A strange thought nagged at him. Throughout his life, the first thing people associated with his name was bastard. He was born of lust and sin, deemed untrustworthy. Yet, the truth was far from that. He was born a king, raised to live a lie, one that people accepted based solely on his name. Had he been called Stark instead of Snow, people's first reaction would have been to see him as a good man. Instead, he was regarded as less than worthy. As he surveyed the vast wilderness, he wondered if the people living there faced similar judgments. Were they, too, considered born on the wrong side of the wall, just as he was seen as born on the wrong side of the sheets? When he claimed his throne, he resolved to discover their stories, to engage with them, and to forge a kingdom where one's name or origins mattered little. What would count was who they were inside. He would start with those born beyond the wall, but first, he needed to claim his crown, his birthright. To do that, he needed to embody the legacy his mother wished for him, to be both dragon and wolf. "There's something I need to tell you, uncle, about my mother," Jon said, his voice steady. "Your mother?" "I don't know who she was, Jon." "I'm sorry," Ben-Jen replied. "I do, uncle." "You do? How?" Jon asked, confusion etched on his face. "Jaime told me. He showed me her letter, the one she left for you." "How did Jaime Lannister know who your mother was?" Ben-Jen asked, clearly puzzled. "Ned Stark is not my father. He's my uncle, just like you." Jon watched as Ben-Jen sighed, the realization dawning on his uncle's face. He knew, had known all along, and said nothing. A fire ignited within Jon, flames of anger rising as he searched for Ghost, but the dire wolf was nowhere to be found. The inferno of his emotions began to rage. "You knew, and you never told me?" Jon shouted, his anger spilling over. "I suspected. I never knew for sure. Jon, you have to believe me, I only suspected Brandon was your father," Ben-Jen replied, his voice trembling. "Brandon?" Jon's anger faltered for a moment. My brother. Your father. I'm sorry, lad. Had I known for certain." "Uncle, Brandon wasn't my father," Jon interrupted. "But you said, wait, uncle, Brandon was your brother too?" "Me, Ned, Brandon, oh gods, oh by the old gods, Lyanna." Ben-Jen fell to his knees, overwhelmed. "Uncle, Jon said, wrapping his arms around him, holding him tight as Benjen wept. I never knew, Jon, I swear it by the old gods. Had I known, oh Lyanna, please forgive me. Uncle, there's nothing to forgive, Jon reassured him. Look at me. You have nothing to be sorry about. Jon, Benjen stuttered. I know, Uncle. I know. Jon nodded as Benjen rose to his feet. They stood in silence for a moment, allowing Benjen to process the revelation that he was now aware he had a sister's son. Jon needed his uncle to be calm for what he would say next. After a brief pause, he felt it was time. What do you know of my father and mother, Uncle? I know some, nephew. I know your mother had no wish to marry Robert. I know your father and mother exchanged letters. I think she was in love with him, but I don't know much more. I never believed he kidnapped her, Jon. I just don't know, Benjen said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. They were in love, Uncle. They were married. After my father had his marriage annulled with Elia, they wed in front of the old gods and in the light of the seven. My mother left letters, there were more, I think, but I don't know what happened to them. I do know they wanted me. They loved me. Benjen stood there, slack-jawed, and for the first time, Jon witnessed the fierce intensity known as the wolf blood. Benjen began pounding the ice hard. Jon tried to pull him away, but it was no use. Uncle, please, stop it. You don't need to do that, Jon pleaded. Thankfully, Benjen halted, turning to him with anger in his eyes. I do, Jon. I left you there. I let him raise you as a bastard, let him raise my sister's boy as a bastard. I thought you were Brandon's, and I could understand that. You would have been a threat to his boy. But this I don't understand. I'm coming with you to Winterfell. Uncle, please. We need to talk more. There's so much you need to know, but you shouldn't come with me. I'm coming, Jon. What Ned did, I won't forgive him for that. Uncle, I need to speak to him on my own. We have important things to discuss, the future, everything. I need to be the one to handle this. If you're there, it complicates things. It becomes about your feelings too. I understand, but I need to do this. Very well, but if he doesn't support you, I swear I'll kill him, Benjen said fiercely. No, I won't have a kinslayer for an uncle, Jon replied firmly. All right, then I'll just beat him bloody, Benjen said, a hint of a grin breaking through. Jon laughed, the tension easing just a little. You're really going for it, aren't you? Benjen added, a smile tugging at his lips. I've seen how poor a King Robert is. The realm suffers while he drinks, feasts, and indulges in his vices. But it's more than that, Uncle. It's what my mother wanted, what my father wanted. There are things about the rebellion that I need to uncover, but it was more than just Robert wanting my mother. I always thought so. I saw him at Harrenhal and spoke to Ned about it. That man never loved Lyanna. I know. Can you tell me about her? About my mother? Jon's voice trembled with emotion. Of course, I'll tell you anything you wish to know, Jon. Are you all right? As Benjen began to speak, he felt a soft whisper in his mind, like the wind itself, urging one word, pack. Jon's eyes widened, and suddenly he found himself in the courtyard. A man was glaring at Jaime, hatred radiating from him. Jon could feel the intensity of that hatred as the man approached, his words dripping with venom. He sensed Jaime's sadness as he turned away, and he felt the smugness of the man as he snickered and walked off. Unable to bear it any longer, Jon surged forward, swift and true. Within seconds, he had tackled the man to the ground. As he reached for his sword and dagger, he bared his teeth and pressed down with his paws. The scent of fear and urine filled the air as it leaped from the man, and in the background, he heard laughter. Then, just like that, he was back on the wall, leaning against his uncle. "Jon, please answer me," Ben-Jen urged. "I'm fine, uncle." "We need to go down to the yard," Jon replied, his voice steady. Ben-Jen nodded, though he still seemed uneasy. Jon explained that he was a warg, and his uncle surprisingly took it in stride. When they reached the bottom, Jon discovered Ghost had a man pinned down, while Jaime and the others were laughing. "Who was that man, uncle?" Jon asked. "That's Thorne, Ser Alistair Thorne, our master-at-arms," Ben-Jen replied. "Why would he have a problem with Lord Jaime? He served the Targaryens, so he probably hasn't forgiven Jaime for killing the king. He deserved to die. Jaime was right to kill him." But he was." Ben-Jen trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. "A madman who killed my grandfather and uncle." "That's all he was, uncle," Jon replied, a hint of frustration in his voice. Ben-Jen smiled. "So, you're thinking about Lord Jaime, are you? Can you trust him?" "More than anyone in the world, uncle." "Would you try to be nice to him for me?" "I will, nephew. If you say he's to be trusted, then he has my trust too." "Thank you," Jon said, relief washing over him. After the Lord Commander reminded them to keep Ghost under control, Jon couldn't help but smile as Jaime and Daisy walked away. Soon after, Loras and the Reeds approached him and Ben-Jen, while Lyra and Jory headed back to their uncle. "Now, have you all been given a tour of this place?" Ben-Jen asked. "No, not really. We just kind of walked around," Mira replied. Ben-Jen nodded for them to follow him and began showing them around. The armory was run by Donal Noy, who was also the smith. Jon grimaced at the mention of his name. This was the man who had forged Robert's hammer. Though Jon had no issue with Noy himself, the memory of that weapon was enough to make him reluctant to spend time with him. The old flint barracks housed most of the men, and it certainly wasn't a welcoming place. But as Ben-Jen showed them the tunnels, things became more interesting. The library was impressive, filled with countless books, and Jon knew he would be spending a lot of time there. When Ben-Jen explained that the tunnels were used for traveling during winter, Jon was amazed, as he was when he saw the ice cells. However, it was the food stores that caught his attention the most. Deep underground, they were lined with ice, mud, straw, and something else he couldn't quite make out. "Uncle, how long does the food you put here last?" Jon asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "I don't know, Jon. Maybe the maester would, but it doesn't." "Why would it go bad?" Jon asked, glancing at the wall. "What's this made of?" "It's just mud and straw bricks mixed with sawdust." "What's going on, Jon? Is this for the ice?" Loras inquired. Look at it, Loras. If we built a place underground like this, we'd be able to store it. If those bricks work, we might not even need to dig underground," Jon replied, running his fingers along the wall. "Do you think you could line a ship's hull like this?" Mira asked. I think we could. I'll need to speak to the maester, but I believe it can be done," Jon said confidently. "What could be done?" Ben-Jen interjected, slightly annoyed at being left out of the conversation. "Ice, uncle. We're going to sell ice," Jon explained, and Loras chuckled. Ben-Jen looked at him as if he'd lost his mind, then shook his head and led them further beneath the vaults. He eventually wrapped up the tour by guiding them down a tunnel that led to the gate itself. The gate was the passage beyond the wall, with the towering structure serving as their roof. As Jon walked, he felt a deep stirring in his bones, an undeniable call from the ice. "Fire and ice. Fire and ice," the voice echoed repeatedly. Jon looked up at the ceiling, watching as it melted, fire dripping over the egg. He heard the voice beckon him, "Help me, brother. Help me."